Welcome one and all to another episode of The Damage Report with me, John Idarola. Very excited to cruise into the weekend with a short stop along the way to throw away some garbage, people. Brett, of course, is not here. He's not gonna be here for some time. He's off helping to launch Unbossed, which is coming October 17th. So we've got a number of awesome guests who are gonna be stepping into his shoes. And tonight, or today, I guess, I'm getting ahead of myself. I'm really ready for Friday night. Today, joining us on The Damage Report, comedian, writer, satirist, contributor, Rebel HQ, now appearing in The Mad King, which I learned from Kelly Carlin reminds her of her father, George. You should definitely go check that out on YouTube. Ben Gleib, welcome to The Damage Report.
Thank you, John, for having me back.
Glad to have you here. We talked about The Mad King the last time you were on, but we promote a lot of stuff on here. We promote a lot of specials. Importantly, when it comes to this one, people can just go see it right now. It's on YouTube. They don't have to, there's no outlay, there's no sign up. They can literally just go see it.
That is true. That's why, my first stand-up special was on Showtime and it's now on YouTube, but I didn't want to even pitch this one to big streamers or to Netflix because they would just bury it. I'm not big enough yet where they're gonna promote it heavily. I wanted this to be easily seen and easily shared. And I also wanted to finally get smart about promo and realize people have too much to look at these days to remember to watch something. So if I'm gonna promote it, it's gotta be available this exact second. So it's on YouTube right now.
Yeah, and by the way, we mentioned it, but I love the endorsement by Kelly Carlin. There's a lot, I was gonna say a lot of political comedians. I would say basically every political comedian would love to be thought of as the next Carlin. To have a Carlin saying that they see that connection, that's gotta be a nice feather in your cap.
It's George Carlin's only offspring. She's an incredible, brilliant human. And when she said that, when she tweeted that, I got tears in my eyes. She then had me on her Sirius satellite radio show. It airs next weekend, I think, and compared me to George Carlin like 4 times. And I don't know if I'm worthy of all that. He's the greatest to ever live, but it definitely made me very sad in a very happy way.
That's awesome. That's awesome. And it's great timing, by the way, for this recognition, because I hear that Trevor Noah is gonna be stepping down from The Daily Show. They're gonna need somebody to step in there. Not saying anything, I'm just saying.
Okay, I'll do it.
Anyway, okay, it was up to me at the end of the day. Anyway, thank you everyone for being here on this Friday show. We've got a lot of news to dive into, and I am excited, by the way, for Ben to throw away his first garbage person. Love your choice there. Can't wait for people to see it in the aftermath. So that's a reminder, if you are watching this on the later platforms, listening on a podcast, that's great, thank you so much. But there's also more show. So be sure to go to our YouTube channel and catch the clips that don't appear on the platform that you're on. That said, in just a moment, we're gonna launch into some of these absolutely amazing corrupt decisions by Judge Eileen Cannon. We're gonna have Fox hosts freaking out when you just state the truth in front of them. Horrible things the Border Patrol is getting up to. And Herschel Walker back in the news. Is it for a good reason? Is it for a bad reason? Could be either one. You're gonna have to stay tuned to find out. And along the way, if you wouldn't mind hitting the like button and sharing the stream, that'd be great. And if you wanna send us any comments, tweets, or super chats, we'll respond as we go. But with all that said, Ben, are you ready to start the show?
I am very ready.
Let's do it. Okay, this is gonna be a fun follow-up to something we talked about a couple of days ago on the show. Judge Eileen Cannon has fully taken the mask off, if it can be ever been said to have been on. She is Trump's pet judge, and she is going to do whatever it takes to protect him in this stolen documents scandal. No matter how ridiculous the decisions, no matter how biased, no matter how contradictory the things she does now are to the things she did earlier in this same process. And so in this clip, we have got, I believe, 3 separate ways that she has just stacked the deck for Donald Trump. And she doesn't care how obviously biased this makes her look. Let's jump into the first, and this is an important one. She set aside a measure imposed by the special master, Raymond Dearie, asking Donald Trump and his legal team to certify the accuracy of the FBI's inventory of the property that it had seized from Mar-a-Lago back in August. So Raymond Dearie, apparently he had this crazy notion. The crazy notion was, if you are going to continually say that the FBI planted documents, here's a list, point to the ones they planted. Point to the ones that you didn't steal. If they planted it, point to it. And she's like, no. Don't make him actually go on the record. Let him just continue to bleed it out on Truth Social. Don't make him have to actually say which ones are planted. Certainly don't put pressure on his lawyers to actually say which one it is, because spoiler alert, they're not gonna do that because it would be lying, and they would love to be able to continue to practice law after this whole thing is wrapped up. And so eventually, this whole claim that the FBI planted documents is going to it's just gonna float away in the wind like Thanos just snapped his fingers. But what Judge Eileen Cannon would like to do is to delay that for as long as possible. And that's what she's doing. And so in her initial order, she says, this is her justification that she gives for doing this. It did not contemplate that obligation. There shall be no separate requirement on plaintiff at this stage prior to the review of any of the seized materials. Now, why? I don't know. She doesn't give a real reason. She just said, I didn't think about that earlier. Okay, I guess. You told Raymond Dearie to handle this. Donald Trump requested that Raymond Dearie handle this. First of all, he requested that a special master handle it. Then he said, I want Raymond Dearie. And so Raymond Dearie is like, okay, if you're claiming it, point to it. And Eileen Cannon is not gonna let that happen. This is just the first of several insane things she's done. But Ben, what do you think?
Well, I think it makes a lot of sense what Judge Cannon's doing here. She's given Trump a chance to see the stuff before saying the stuff. That way he can make it up on the spot and not have to actually prove that he knows which documents he had and which he didn't, which is, as you said, the most corrupting possible. So good for her, good for Trump for appointing a judge that really has got his back on this. Literally what they're instead doing is letting him first see all of the documents and at once comment on which are what kind of privilege, which he claims were planted, which weren't, once he sees them. That's literally like saying, this one that you just presented to me, this one was stolen, this one was planted, this one was stolen, this one was planted. You gotta be able to do it from your mind. And I'm just wondering, I know you have more of the trifecta of hits here from the judge, but I'm just wondering if at some point it can be evidence against Trump, the things that this judge decides, maybe on appeal, because if you appoint a judge yourself who is then making very biased decisions, and also shows you the forethought of Trump's crimes. He said, he definitely thought, I'm definitely gonna put the most pro-me judge in the county that covers Mar-a-Lago because I've got plans, I've got post-presidency crime plans. I need my #1 guy / girl right there. And so at some point, can they say, look at the decisions from this judge, that's evidence that he indeed stole these documents.
Yeah, I honestly hadn't thought about, like, obviously he wants people who are gonna be biased towards him. I hadn't thought about specifically how much pressure there'd be on him mentally to pick someone in where he's going to go, where he knows he's gonna move. That's a great point. I don't know if any of this can be counted as evidence against him, but it's definitely evidence against Eileen Cannon, as well as our judiciary. So like, she got the job from him. In theory, her next job, she could get that from him too. If he were to return to the presidency, I'm sure she'd like to be on the Supreme Court someday. Today is the day, of course, that we saw that Samuel Alito is saying that to even question the integrity of the Supreme Court is crossing a line. Well, I don't know, like, Alito, don't talk to us, talk to Judge Eileen Cannon, because she's making you guys look bad. This whole thing looks really corrupt.
Also, sure, maybe it's crossing a line to question the court, but that was only how it used to be. Let's just say that was the precedent of not questioning the court. But apparently precedent doesn't matter.
We don't follow it anyway. That precedent was wrongly decided in the first place. So there's that. He doesn't have to actually say that documents were planted, which documents were planted, because he couldn't say that. His legal team couldn't say that. She knows it and she's gonna protect him. It's incredibly corrupt, it's transparent, but there it is. There's also this. And again, if this whole thing is about delaying things, the best way to prove that to us would be to literally delay things, which she did. Yesterday, She ruled slowing down the process, giving Mr. Trump's lawyers significantly more time to assess documents. Under Judge Deary's previous proposal, he could have analyzed the central issue raised by Mr. Trump's claims of executive privilege as soon as late October this month. Instead, now she's going to be delaying his submission of a report and recommendations until December. Once again, that is not only additional months that the special master that she appointed, that Trump requested, that he specifically said he wanted this guy, says is not necessary. He says he can do this by October. It also importantly pushes it past the midterms. And so, yeah,
it's got to be a coincidence, John, right? It's got to be a coincidence that she pushed it just past the elections, huh? I don't buy it.
It is literally just delaying it. And the delay is important, not only because it would be nice to know, but also like not everybody is going to stay on this topic, particularly after the midterms. Like, let's say the Republicans take over. God only knows what they're going to be planning. Trump could be the Speaker of the House by then. And we're supposed to be remembering all of these scandals? No, we need it. We need the details to come out now so we can evaluate them without our thoughts about it being muddled by the sheer passage of time. But she understands the flip side of that. And that is why she has been at all points trying to delay this process. This is just the most transparent version of it.
Yeah, it's unbelievable. There was one tiny victory for the prosecution of this, for the Justice Department that is trying to prove it. And at least there's like some modicum left of, we won't side with Trump when maybe people's lives are on the line. She agreed to keep the unredacted affidavit sealed just because it would be literally risking the lives of FBI agents. That one she found maybe a half bridge too far, a Chris Christie closed bridge too far from getting Trump's back. I'll do anything as long as it doesn't kill people. He's like, not my first choice, but I can live with it.
Yeah, 100. No, that's good. And also, that's kind of an easy one for her because I don't know how unsealing and allowing that guy's name to come out would directly benefit Trump. Trump would use it. He would tweet, he would bleat about the guy 50 times over the next 3 days, and the guy would definitely get death threats, but it wouldn't actually help his legal case.
Well, I was just gonna say, I don't know if you're about to cover it, but also she just is making it. And are you gonna cover about how she also removed the requirement that he differentiate when it comes to time between?
Yep. All right, just about to, yeah. Oh no, I'm as into that topic as you. So why don't we launch into that?
A lot of fun, crazy details.
You must be thinking at this point that surely Judge Eileen Cannon has run out of ways that she can stack the deck in favor of Donald Trump. No, she has a very important one that she's also throwing at Judge Deary, who technically is still the special master, but with every legal blow coming from Cannon, he seems a little bit less special and a little bit less like a master. So what he had done, Judge Deary, was direct Mr. Trump's legal team to sort any documents over which he intended to assert executive privilege into 2 different categories. Privilege that would shield White House information from disclosure to people outside the executive branch, like Congress, and privilege that would purportedly shield such information from review within the executive branch. Because importantly, and I'm gonna point this out, not because I think everyone watching this needs to know, but I'm just hoping that if like any newscasters or pundits on Fox are watching, they'll learn this. The DOJ is very much a part of the executive branch. And so making that particular broad claim wouldn't make any sense whatsoever. It would not in any way hinder the DOJ from doing this investigation. And so Judge Cannon thought, no, we can't let him do that. Because if he's forced to put it into that category, then that opens up the DOJ to claim that you can't be restraining our ability to look at these. So she sided with Trump. Mr. Trump's lawyers need only say whether something was subject to executive privilege. And if so, to include a statement with a quote, sufficient description of the rationale and scope of the assertion from which to evaluate the merits of the assertion, which has the word assertion multiple times so that you will fall asleep midway through. But also importantly, in the right hands, that might be okay, requiring a sufficient description of the rationale. The issue is that the hands will be hers and she can't be trusted in this. So even if Raymond Deary like expects a sufficient description, what Judge Deary says at this point arguably doesn't matter because she is willing to jump in front of every legal bullet headed towards Trump's legal team that Dearie manages to put out there. And so, like, everything that he has pushed for seems highly reasonable. But unfortunately, Judge Eileen Cannon has the last say right now. And I don't think that this at the end of the day is gonna stop, from us figuring out exactly what's going to happen. But every bit of this delays it, Ben, and that's the frustrating part.
Yes, it does. And it really, again, shows how in Trump's pocket she seems to be, because knowing how Trump speaks and knowing how he's not somebody who's able to discern specifics, and he's not somebody who's able to ever really, nuance is not his best strong suit. So instead of having him have to say specifically this kind of executive privilege versus that kind, it really just feeds perfectly into Trump's general way of speaking, where he's saying all these are privileged. It's kind of like the decision saying, instead of being specific as far as what legally you can claim privilege on, can you just kind of say those are mine, those aren't mine, and that's good enough? She's giving him as broad of a childlike category to say, especially because it's even without merit entirely, because as you may or may not know, those of you watching, a sitting president has to be the one to claim executive privilege on documents. It cannot be done by a former guy. And Joe Biden has not given any of that cover to Donald Trump for obvious reasons. So it doesn't even really matter in the end of the day. And that should be the ruling. Sorry, too late for executive privilege, regardless of whether it's within the executive branch where none should exist or outside where none can exist, because you ain't president no more, homie.
That's just a fact. It might be inconvenient if you wanted to still have these documents. Maybe you should have won the election. I know that would have been difficult. All you would have had to have done is spend a couple of weeks in 2020 pretending like the impending death of hundreds of thousands of our citizens was a bad thing. That probably would have been enough to swing it to you. But anyway, look, there's also.
He's probably about to call the Georgia Secretary of State again and be like, I just need you to find 150 classified documents, okay? They're missing.
Find me 2 more Judge Eileen Cannons. Can we get some cloning going on? Call Elon. Anyway, this is all so blatant, And look, I'm not a legal scholar. I know I look like one, but I'm not. But they are weighing in. Jessica Levinson is a professor of law at Loyola, legal contributor. CBS News says it seems being slapped down herself by the 11th Circuit didn't make Judge Cannon any more circumspect. No, it seems to have only inspired her to greater depths of corruption. Empty Wheel is well, that's not actually the person's name, that's their Twitter name. A national security and civil liberties reporter, former federal prosecutor and legal analyst, says Cannon is basically jumping up and down on a scale that her special master is supposed to still own. It's hilarious, corrupt, shameless, and obvious. Although Renato Mariotti, who's also a commentator on Legal Affairs, says this is just a minor win because now they don't have to essentially disavow their claims that evidence was planted and all that, but it doesn't change the essential issue, which is that he stole documents. And I do agree with that. But again, you don't have to change the fundamental facts necessarily. Delaying could be its own win, especially if it affects the outcome of the midterms. I mean, that is the gift that will keep on giving for literally years at that point. That is the major win. And so that's my worry right now, is that she can be shown to be corrupt and all that, but that might not save us in the end.
True, but also the only saving grace we still have is that Trump is a child that can't keep his mouth shut, and he keeps incriminating himself just constantly in interviews on Fox and on Truth Social, and telling us that, oh, I put those documents because I was allowed to. Oh, I put those documents, and less repeating the planted thing, which can we start more aggressively using his current statements on things to continue as evidence? They don't use that enough in Jan 6 either. They in the committee, they're like, well, he just again today said I will give full pardons I will strongly consider giving full pardons to all the Jan 6 people who, by the way, you didn't give when you were still president and could have done, so you're full of it. But the fact that you're still saying publicly it is morally okay proves yet again you are still now trying to overthrow our democracy. That should be all the evidence you need, that piece alone. So all of these things, each time he says, I can declassify it with my mind, Sean, as soon as that's debunked, guilty. Let's start getting the process sped up a little bit here on account of obvious facts that are being admitted in the public square.
Well, let's end this little conversation with a bit of fun, and then a bit of a look ahead to how this is supposed to develop over the next few weeks. We know a few things about Donald Trump. One, that he definitely stole tons of documents he wasn't supposed to. And two, he absolutely despises paying anyone who does any work for him. And the DOJ understands both of those things too. And so they decided to troll him a little bit, or at least that's the way I'm interpreting it. So the DOJ has asked Raymond Dearie, the special master, for another day to secure a third-party vendor to create this online portal that they'll use to share information with Donald Trump and his legal team, because no vendor thus far that they've approached is agreeing to work with Donald Trump. Now, what does that mean? Why would they be working with Donald Trump? Are they working with the DOJ? Sort of, they're working with both. But importantly, remember, Donald Trump is the one that has to pay them. And so none of them want to do that work because he doesn't want to pay when it's like his thing. When it's a portal designed to share information that proves he committed crimes, you think he's gonna be writing those checks? No way. And so they sent this letter to him, and we'll put it up there. Mueller, she wrote, shared it on Twitter. The important part is the last sentence. This is from the DOJ. Plaintiff to pay the vendor's invoices promptly when rendered. So they are acknowledging that this dude doesn't pay his obligations, and they're putting pressure on Raymond Dearie to make sure that he does. Now, he seems pretty fair. I have a feeling he will rule that way. It's going to be hilarious to see what Judge Eileen Cannon does to say that Trump doesn't have to actually pay this thing. Because again, if he doesn't, and if that means they can't get a third-party vendor, then that is again going to slow things down.
Yes, and not just that, but they were saying that they would only do it if the Justice Department agrees to pay for it in advance, and that like basically front the money. And they're not gonna do it. I don't know why these places don't just say, okay, we'll do it for Trump, but money up front, bro. Money up front. Probably because they don't even trust his money up front. They're gonna be using one of those markers on his 20s and his 100s, making sure they're not counterfeit.
Yeah.
They just need to check it at every corner. I mean, he's the president. He easily could have been like, I'd like to tour the mint. I wouldn't be surprised if he toured the mint when he was president and just pocketed tons of money. It reminds me of this great clip that shows the great delusion of Trump supporters. Back one point during his presidency, he went and visited one of his hotels. I think it was his hotel in DC, and there were a bunch of workers there, everyday workers, and Trump, who clearly had like an air of disgust being around them even, but kind of condescendingly took out a wad of cash from his pocket and peels off like 3 or 4 $1 bills from the top and hands them to one of the workers. And they're like, oh, thank you, sir, thank you, sir. And then slyly, you can see in the video, keeps the wad in his hand and puts it back in his pocket. It probably was only $300-400. He could have at least garnered some good faith by giving the whole wad to the workers, and every one of his supporters that you could clearly see him pocketing most of the wad said he gave all of his money to these workers out of his own pocket. They don't even trust their own eyes.
Yeah. No, it's the, the what's that, the king wears no clothes or whatever. It's that thing. Like he could walk around fully naked and they'd be talking about his marvelous robes, his tie that goes down to his knees. Yeah, they deny what's right in front of their faces.
Plus, I guess if you see something going down to Trump's knees, you'd have to assume it's a tie because we know it's not other stuff.
I don't like that. I don't like that at all. Okay, we're gonna take a short break now. I wasn't planning to, but now I need to, because I'm gonna spew. Anyway, on the other side, we're gonna be talking about crime and listing some facts, which are incredibly inconvenient to people like Judge Pirro. We're gonna reveal all that to you and more after this. As sometimes happens, I got a little bit too into reading the comments, but I'm gonna stick with it. Stephmont over on Twitch says, I am 2 hours into a 5-hour drive with a 9 and 6-year-old, and TDR, like always, is helping my sanity. No worries, my husband is driving, so I'm not watching or commenting while driving. Yeah, typing up that comment would be a bit of an issue if you're driving around, but I'm glad you're able to do it from the passenger side.
I also love the idea that there's these young children that are gonna be at the schoolyard tomorrow being like, I'm just telling you, clearly this judge is corrupt.
Did you hear what she said to Raymond Dearie? I will never understand it. Anyway, that is going to be a great conversation to interrupt a game of tag. Okay, with that, we got a lot more to get to. Let's jump into this next video.
It is working. The reality is that
there's 1,000 people killed in 20 months.
It is working. The reality is, when you look at all these different jurisdictions, we have had a devastating blow from the pandemic, and there is absolutely no correlation between being progressive or traditional and the rate of crime. These states in the United States that have a rate of homicide that is 40% higher are MAGA states. They are Trump states.
When you're under fire, just call people, just go to Trump and see if you can get cover that way.
First of all, the governor doesn't control the police in individual cities in an individual state. So get off the MAGA states. That's number one. Number two, this DA is an idiot. He says there is no correlation between crime and an aggressive and a traditional versus a progressive DA. I'm going to tell you what the correlation is. The progressive DA wants to let the criminal out. The traditional DA wants to lock him up and throw away the key and make sure that he pays for the crime that he commits. All right, that's real simple. So Krasner's out of his mind.
Okay, so Judge Pirro does not like it when you cite facts. And so she freaked out a little bit there. Now, I'm gonna need everyone to be nice to her. That was not their first segment that day, so she's at least a bottle and a half deep at that point. But what she said there was awesome, because Krasner talked about correlation. Correlation, people throw that out there, but it means something. It means that you can actually measure the connection between two different things. And so she said, I'll show you the correlation. They wanna let out the criminals. I took stats classes. That's not one of the things that you learn in stats classes. And the issue for Pirro is that while she would love to point to progressive DAs in random cities and say, oh, look, there's more crime there, that is obviously ignoring the fact that we are in very tough times and there's more crime literally everywhere. Simply pointing anecdotally to one city that you think buttresses your case and ignoring the others is not how you prove an actual thing. There is an ability to do that, and the stats have been done. We're gonna give you those actual facts in a little bit, see if we can push Pirro totally over the edge. But first, Ben, I wanted to give you a chance to jump in.
Well, I also love Dana Perino kicking it off with that very quick. People might forget Dana Perino was George W. Bush's press secretary. We love taking these corrupt former press secretaries from these corrupt Republican presidents and putting them on the news, letting them continue their great job of just obfuscating facts. She goes, oh, as soon as there's something there, you just blame Trump. You don't blame Trump people, Trump countries, Trump counties, Trump states. You do it because of statistics. Janine Pirro goes, this guy's an idiot. It's not about MAGA states for any political reason. It's that the crime overall is higher there. These are called statistics. Also, is Janine Pirro just having a slow rolling stroke over the last 5 years? She sounds like someone's turning off a robot very slowly. And it's not even this idea is super.
If it's a robot, it's an ethanol powered one. But anyway, yeah, she's doing her best.
I think she's smoking tar sands personally.
That is possible. That challenge her to, and she will. No, just ride by her house on a bicycle, and in response, she'll smoke tar sands. Anyway, here is the issue, and there are issues.
Get off my lawn! I'm having a nice tar smoke. Get away from me!
Oh my God. Okay, let's talk about the overall problem, and then let's talk about what Krasner was actually referencing there. So first of all, the US did see a 30% increase in murder back in 2020. Unfortunately for Pirro, that was when Trump was still president. Biden being president is why we have more crime, but the fact that the crime went up while Trump was president doesn't mean that he's responsible. That's always the way it works. While 2021 data is not yet complete, murder did appear to also be on the rise again this last year. And so as a result of that, because the midterms are coming up and because Biden is president, the Republicans want to say this is a problem for Democrats, which it could actually be. Not because they state it to be so, but it could factually turn out to be the case. But to find out whether that's true or not, you do not need a Pirro or a Perino or whatever. What you need are social scientists to actually look into the actual stats that have been generated. And so we know that back in 2020, per capita murder rates were 40% higher in states won by Donald Trump than those won by Joe Biden. And to that, Pirro would say, lay off the MAGA states. Well, okay, I'm gonna lay off to some extent in that simply the fact that they voted for Trump is not why there was more crime. But I'm sorry, Pirro, you're not gonna like the most plausible explanations for why the crime is higher there, which we'll get to. 8 of the top 10 worst murder rate states voted for Trump in 2020. None of those 8 has supported a Democrat for president since 1996. And so just the ideology of the area is not responsible for it. Certainly not if who you want to blame are the Democrats, and that's what they are doing. In Jacksonville, which has a Republican mayor, importantly, we're not talking about the governor, Pirro, we're talking about the mayor, who actually does have influence over the police there. They had 128 more murders back in 2020 than San Francisco, which has a Democratic mayor. They are very similar populations, and you have heard no end of claims about Democrats in San Francisco over the last few years on San Francisco, and yet Jacksonville gets a pass, I guess. Bakersfield, that's the district that Kevin McCarthy is from, has a Republican mayor, has a much higher murder rate than San Francisco. And you can also go by this at the state level, with Mississippi having the highest homicide rate in the country. And so why is that? Well, look, we've been through a pandemic. There's been a lot of chaos. People lose their jobs. There's a lot of reasons, but largely in and outside of a pandemic, the places that have more homicides have more of the tools that make homicides easy to commit. Guns. That's why it's red states. It's not more murder because they like Trump in some abstract way. It's easier to kill people in these places because they've made it easier by flooding it with guns. It's not progressive DAs, it's weapons of war. It's routine access to things that get people killed. I saw a case recently of a guy who saw a couple walking by his house and they let their dog pee on something or poop on something, I don't know. And so he did what you do. He grabbed his assault weapon and shot both of them. Ooh. Okay? That wouldn't have happened if he hadn't had an assault weapon to grab. He might have yelled at them. He might have punched them. I have a feeling he wouldn't have killed them with his bare hands. The gun being there made it possible. But this is another conversation, I think, Ben, that would make Pirro very uncomfortable.
Yeah, it would. It's just incredible that the party that claims to be the party of law and order always seems to be really against liberal areas that maybe are admittedly a little softer on the smaller crimes that maybe even shouldn't be crimes, like victimless drug crimes, like weed related things. And maybe while I think we should be harder on shoplifters than California's been recently, maybe that's not a crime that takes someone's life. And the Republican states tend to be really loose on the big crimes, like have guns, not stop people from being murdered, following democracy, the rule of our elections, that kind of stuff. They don't seem so law and order when it's the laws that could crumble an entire country or could take your life randomly when your dog's walking.
Yeah.
It's just wild. And also, who knew that in 2020 there was other reasons to stay indoors? I'm glad most of us stayed indoors with this increased murder rate. This is a little known statistic, though, that I'm making up in my head, but stabbing murders were down during 2020, mostly on account of the 6 feet social distancing. You just can't really reach. You know?
I'm glad that at least some people, the prospective knife murderers, were willing to abide by social distancing guidelines.
I would stab you now, but there's stickers on the floor, so you'll escape today.
Would you mind leaning in a bit? Anyway, oh geez. Okay, let's move to another little topic I want to make sure that we get to. There is no good reason for Border Patrol, for the customs, for any law enforcement to talk to someone who's coming into our country and ask them if they've recently had an abortion. But they are doing that, and they think it's perfectly fine. Here we're talking about an Australian tourist who was deported from the US after being asked whether she had recently had an abortion. She'd been told by the Customs and Border Protection that agents acted properly in those interactions with her. You can see a picture here of her and her cat. I don't know if the cat was deported too. But she's an Australian citizen where abortion is legal, passing through LAX in a state where abortion is legal, on our way to Canada where abortion is legal. And yet we are certainly acting like a certain Hulu show here. She was detained by the CBP, asked whether she was pregnant, she wasn't, and whether she'd recently had an abortion. Now notice, this was earlier this year. Just days earlier, Roe v. Wade had been overturned. Now, did this influence the Border Patrol? I don't know, maybe they would have done this anyway. But in a recent interview, spokesperson for CBP denied that Gourley had ever been questioned about an abortion specifically. However, a special agent who called Gourley this week with a follow-up told her it was a policy to ask about termination of pregnancy. So I don't know what game they think they're playing, that if they don't say the word abortion, then we're fine. We didn't break any laws. You asked her if she had terminated a pregnancy recently. And look, we can go into the specific ways that this is not only unethical, obviously, but directly goes against the guidelines that have been stated about what sort of questions should be asked at the border by Customs and Border Patrol. We might get to that, but Ben, what do you think about this?
I mean, not only is it unethical, super creepy, right? What is the reasoning here? We're just keeping statistics. Are you crossing the border for 1 or 1.5? We're just checking here. What is the thought? I don't understand. It's a very strange line of questioning.
Yeah, 100%. And look, we don't have a ton of time, but I'm just gonna say, on the CBP's website, you can find information about what sort of questions they're supposed to ask. Now, their argument would be, we might need to know if someone might be at an elevated risk of some sort of health problem in the near future. To which I would say, mind your business, honestly. When it comes to something like the loss of a pregnancy, no, because clearly you're not asking about all risk factors. You've decided that this is one that's the business of every random Border Patrol agent. But even if you bought that they have a good reason to do that, on their guidelines, it says to ask about pregnancy losses such as stillbirths and miscarriages. There are no references to termination of pregnancies. So even if we accept their rationale, they're not abiding by it. They are going beyond, making it far more specific about a topic that had obviously just at that point recently been very much in the news.
John, just before you move on to the next story, you are currently hosting a news program. So have you had any abortions recently?
Jesus. Briefly, it enrages me that you would ask that, but I do know that on your website as a comedian, it does say that you will ask questions like that. And so I guess I just have to allow it.
I just need to know, there's certain things I need to know, John.
Exactly. On that website, you can find out which questions Ben might ask you, as well as details about the Mad King. So definitely head over there.
Thank you.
Thank you. I just want to end with one nice little note. India's Supreme Court just recently allowed all women, regardless of marital status, to have abortions up to 24 weeks into pregnancies. That is good news for India, and it's an inspiration to backwards countries like the United States that maybe someday we can treat our people with empathy and compassion too. Not now, probably not in the near future, but maybe decades into the future, our kids or grandkids will be treated with some basic level of human dignity. Anyway, with that said, we're gonna take our second break. When we come back, we told you yesterday Ginni Thomas was gonna be testifying before the January 6th committee. That has now happened, and we're gonna give you a breakdown of it after this. Okay, I think that we have just enough time to hit these two topics before the end of our first hour, but stay tuned because on the other side, in the aftermath, we will be throwing away our garbage people of the week. You're not gonna wanna miss it. With that said, why don't we jump into this? Ginni Thomas has now testified before the January 6th committee, and reports of what exactly went down are starting to come out, and we need to talk about it because Ginni Thomas is not only a certified cuckoo bird who believes every conspiracy theory she comes across on Facebook or Telegram or whatever, she is also, of course, as pictured there, the wife to a Supreme Court justice. And the fact that she spent the time between the 2020 election and January 6th communicating with state legislators, with people in the orbit of Donald Trump, that is very worrying. And so while we didn't get to see the testimony and the public hearings have been delayed by Hurricane Ian, we did get a few details of what they talked about. So first of all, here is why they thought it was important to bring her in. She came into focus for the committee after they obtained email correspondence between her and John Eastman, a Trump attorney and other crazy person, who championed an effort to pressure Mike Pence to block the certification of electors on January 6th. She also sent emails to 2 Wisconsin Republican legislators days after the election, pushing them to name an alternate slate of electors, which is very much not a thing. She also corresponded via text messages with Mark Meadows in the days following the 2020 election, urging him to set fire to democracy and just declare Trump the winner. So what happened when she went in yesterday? Well, she told the panel that she had not discussed any of the legal challenges to the 2020 election with her husband, Judge Clarence Thomas. Thomas had delivered an opening statement in which she said that she had never spoken to Clarence about pending cases before the Supreme Court, calling it an ironclad rule in our home. And this is where it gets really funny. She says that her husband is, quote, uninterested in politics. I generally do not discuss with him day-to-day work in politics, the topics I am working on, who I am calling, emailing, texting, or meeting. I know he was completely unaware of my text with Mark Meadows until this committee leaked him to the press while he was in a hospital bed fighting an infection. I love that they make the fact that her awful behaviors became public, that now we're supposed to feel bad about that because he happened to be sick at that point. Okay, don't do terrible things when your husband's in ill health if you think that might exacerbate his condition or whatever. I also love, by the way,
by his bedside when he's sick instead of trying to overturn the election.
Exactly. One other thing though, before we discuss, I love that she presented that last thing as, you need not worry, we wouldn't sully our marriage with these talks. That would be a conflict of interest. And so there is an iron wall between my doings and Clarence Thomas. When I think a more plausible argument is he got real sick of hearing about her wackadoodle conspiracy theories. And he's like, don't talk to me about it. I don't wanna know, no text messages. Stop sending me memes. Don't link me to stuff that Dinesh D'Souza put out. I'm not interested. That seems more plausible to me.
Or he's just not interested in pretty much anything. I mean, from the man that didn't utter 2 words during any argument before the Supreme Court for like 17 years before he asked one question. I just think the guy's a dud in general.
I definitely think so. He's like the ancient turtle in a never-ending story. He would prefer to stay asleep, and if you do have to bother him, please leave soon. Also, you might lose your horse. Anyway, that's I don't buy anything that she just said there. She did, however, during her testimony, maintain that the election was stolen. She still believes this, as millions of people believe. The election was a year and a half ago. They have found absolutely no evidence the election was stolen. It's just, you can't get through to these people. We should be able to have higher standards for someone potentially influencing a Supreme Court justice than we would have for any random person replying to one of our tweets. But in this case, unfortunately, we cannot. This is who she is, Ben.
At least if there's a Supreme Court justice to not have very high standards for, Clarence Thomas is high on the list there. At least she is influencing somebody who doesn't have very high standards of his own. I'd like to remind everybody of his insane paper that he released, his opinion when Roe v. Wade was overturned. And he was the one justice that said, let's go further. We should now be considering stopping people's right to contraception and people's right to gay marriage. Very interesting, of course, that he stopped just shy of also reconsidering interracial marriage in this country. Oh, because that's the one that he benefits from. It's amazing how corrupt people can be right up until the point of their own personal lives. And then oops, which of course the same applies to all of these Republicans who are against abortion, except their own abortions.
Exactly. Yeah, they'll do narrow carve-outs for rights for themselves, which is another reason why I think we need a lot of diversity in the judiciary. And I mean, even for Republicans, because if we can get enough different types of Republicans with enough narrowly defined self-interest, then that might be a proxy for them actually caring about the American people.
Yes, this is exactly right. I did a whole Rebel HQ video this week quoting several stories of people that are pro-life advocates and protesters at abortion clinics who then went into those same clinics to get abortions. And when the doctor went up and said, is your mind changed now that your daughter's getting one today? They said, you don't know the circumstances around my daughter, and then return to the picket lines the next day.
Oh my God.
When it's my daughter, it's okay. You don't understand what she's going through, but let's tell other people they're murderers the very next day. Your daughter's a murderer according to your thought process, lady.
I hate it. I just hate it. Okay, we're gonna move on to our last topic in just one sec. First of all, Darren Dragon says Mad King is a great Brett replacement. Well, look at that. Look at that.
Thank you very
kindly.
kindly.
Don't tell Brett. He's doing a good job.
I would never.
Okay, with that, let's jump into one more topic. Herschel Walker is back in the news, and yes, he said another awful, stupid thing. Specifically here, he seems to have finally read the room on what being a conservative, what being a Republican politician is all about in 2022. And so he's attacking trans people, trans kids specifically. Yes, he says that they won't go to heaven, which is definitely up to him. So let's give you specifically what he said. He was teaming up at a rally with an athlete who's become the symbol of opposition to transgender sports. He says there at this rally that transgender kids would not be able to access heaven. I'm not even going to name the athlete. I guess you'll see it in the graphic. They shouldn't be known for anything if this is the stand they're gonna take. But Walker said Jesus may not recognize you because he made you a boy, he made you a girl. When I get to heaven, I want the Lord to recognize me, because I can tell you right now, they're telling the young kids in school, you can be a boy tomorrow, even if you're a girl. Well, first of all, I want to reassure Herschel Walker that if he makes it to the pearly gates, I think Jesus is gonna recognize him for a couple reasons. One, he's the creator of everything. How are you gonna fool him? I think it's gonna take more than glasses, a mustache, and a fake nose. But also, you're the guy that has held a gun to multiple people's different heads. That's gonna stand out to the divine Lord of everything. But importantly here, he decided at this event, Ben, that he needs to slam trans kids and say that on top of all of the other struggles, many of which totally needless, our culture has just decided to put it on them with our small-mindedness, our xenophobia. Also, by the way, we're gonna make your life hell here, and then when you die, you don't get to go to heaven. Can you imagine anyone saying that? The idea that a Christian would say that is so fundamentally disgusting.
Well, I'd like to disagree. Herschel Walker is just calling it like it is. He knows he's got a direct channel to the Lord Almighty, and he's calling it like it is. He happens to know that for God, who is all-knowing and all-powerful, he does have one weakness. It's wigs. He can't see through wigs and makeup. To him, that's the Clark Kent eyeglasses, where you can't tell it's Superman. It's just one of the things he can't see through. So he's just trying to help out here. And also, the opinion is so incredibly stupid because if Herschel Walker has any hope to ever get into heaven, he's gonna have to be in heavy disguise. He should really go up there dressed as a woman. It's his only chance in.
I think that would be a start. I think no, it's just it's insane.
I'm not Herschel Walker. Please let me inside.
This is a religion that, if you believe it literally, as some people do, he well might, they took a bone out of a man to make a woman. Jesus is multiple things simultaneously. Like there should be a bit of flexibility mentally, the ability to imagine a construct not so rigidly defined. But we don't get them out of them.
That story to be true. I don't know if you know this, but there's an actual quote. This is not reported a lot, but after God took Adam's rib out and made Eve out of it, obviously the two of them had to procreate to make all of humanity happen. And God's exact quote of advice to them, as he gave them a little privacy, was go F yourselves. It's the only way you can get it done. They had to get the work done.
Where I was expecting that to go, but not there. I like it. Anyway, I'm gonna close this segment this hour by saying that Herschel Walker says a lot of really stupid things and a lot of really cruel things. This is more in the cruel category though, because it's not stupid from an electoral point of view. He gets who his prospective voters are, and they are every bit as cruel as what he's demonstrating here, whether he believes it or not, and he probably does. This is what his party is, and he understands that. Unfortunately, that is all the time we have for this first hour of the show. If you're on the linear platforms of the podcast, thank you so much for watching and or listening. We really do appreciate it. But if you're on the full show, there's way more to come, including the garbage people of the week, so don't go anywhere. Ben and I will be right back. Thanks for listening to the full episode of The Damage Report. Support our work, listen ad-free, access members-only bonus content, and more by subscribing to Apple Podcasts at apple.co/TYT. I'm your host, John Adarola. I'll see you soon.